What's good, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with the overall market, what you should be watching for as time progresses. I'm going to break down some new changes that happened from a technical standpoint, which are suggesting that the market could go a little bit higher again. We could see some bars push just a little bit higher, but then the market may remain choppy, and eventually there should be a decline coming a little bit later. But this decline could be a bit delayed because of what's about to happen. Now, we have a lot of Fed speakers and such coming out for tomorrow, alongside Jerome Powell giving another speech for Wednesday, and all these different things to be discussing for the markets. But before I say anything about all these pieces of data, before I talk about all this information, I have to mention a few things real quick. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. Offer ends in 9 days. Check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. So the market is going parabolic again. I mean, the market was looking like it was getting ready to decline a bit, but now we saw buyers defend it again. And it looks like the market could actually go higher because we ended up developing a bullish wedge. And that's the thing about day trading. Sometimes things could change in an instant. Sometimes things could just flip when you least expect it. So I'm thinking that the market might actually go a little bit higher for a bit more upside. And then we're eventually going to see the market become range bound and start trading sideways. But then I still anticipate a decline to be coming later on. It's just a little bit delayed, like I was saying earlier. So I'm going to break down why this is and how this could affect SPY and all these different tickers, and why on earth things just shifted. So for earnings, don't forget we have Uber for tomorrow before the market opens. Then we have Rivian after the market closes. This could affect other EVs. For Wednesday, we have Roblox before open. Then we have AMC and Disney. That's going to be very important for retail after the market closes. Disney is going to be very important as well. And then we just have some minor ones for Thursday and Friday. Nothing too crazy on the earnings side, as the majority of the tech stocks are basically out, except for like Nvda. And then for the economic calendar, something big has just happened. So we have some Fed speakers for tomorrow. We have Barr, Jeffrey, Waller, Williams, and Logan all giving speeches for tomorrow that could affect the markets, causing some volatility. Most of the Fed speakers likely agree that the market does not need too many more rate hikes, and this could be a little positive for the markets. Then we have the economic optimism report coming out at 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and total household debt is coming out at noon. So all this stuff could cause more volatility around 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll see what that causes. And then all of this is very important because these Fed speakers are coming out right before Wednesday. And that's important because Jerome Powell is giving a speech at 10:15 a.m. He's likely going to cause some volatility, and this is going to have a big effect on the markets. So just be very careful as we approach his speech. Now, the Nasdaq closes higher on Monday. This is the longest winning streak since January of 2023. So pretty crazy stuff so far in the markets. Now the question is, will the market continue from here? So here's what happened. We saw more buyers defending their positions. We're getting very close to a bearish cross on the PPO on the 4-hour. We don't have as much bullish momentum as what we had earlier during last week, right when we saw SPY just continuing to rip. But there is still potential for upside because we're developing a bullish wedge now. And we ended up seeing the buyers stepping in and defending their positions. And this is leading me to switch my view a bit. So I still hold the same view that a pullback is eventually coming. But before the pullback comes to the markets, I think we could see a bit more upside. We also have Jerome Powell giving a speech and lots of Fed speakers. So the market could pump just a little bit more, but I think we're just going to be range bound for an extended period of time. But then later on, as time goes on, as we approach the end of this week, maybe going into early next week, I anticipate some downside. I think the market will have to pull back in a very healthy manner. We're just not there quite yet. So this is something that's part of trading. Sometimes unexpected things could happen and the market could make big moves. And sometimes the market could just flip like crazy and super, super quickly. So when it happens, guys, we just have to accept it and read what's ahead of us. So looking at Apple, I think Apple might help the stock market continue to pump because we're on an uptrend on Apple. And unfortunately, at least for the bears, we're not ready to decline unless we break this white trend line and we see Apple get below 178. Apple was declining, it started to look weak, but then we ended up seeing buyers kick this thing right back up at 178. And now we're going to be watching this resistance around 179.5. We have a bullish wedge developing, which tells us that this thing might get very close to 180 and push SPY and the QQQ up just a little bit. but the market is not going to just continue to pump super hard. I think it's going to be like a minor pump. And then the market's just going to be stuck with range bound price action going back and forth and back and forth. And later on, either at the end of the day tomorrow, maybe going into like the later days of this week, I still think the market should decline soon. It's just we're not ready quite yet. So Apple looks like it might retest 180. We'll see if this holds or not. Pump a little bit more. We have a bullish wedge developing. And I think that if this thing does pop a bit more, this could help SPY and the QQQ in the process. On SPY, I just wanted to call out something very important. Now, we were getting ready for a decline. We were getting very close to it, but the buyers defended this 433 area. I told everyone if we lost 433 on SPY, I would turn bearish, and I think this thing could have started to sink to fill its gap. Instead, the buyers came in and they pushed it right back up. They defended 433. That tells us that we're not ready just yet to see this thing start to curl and decline. And they were trying to trap lots of investors during that move. So, what do I see happening in the future? We have a bullish wedge developing on SPY right here. So, there's a good chance it's going to try to go a little bit higher when we open tomorrow. We could be watching for 436 to be retested. If we break it, watch 437 and then 438 as tight resistance. We have some tough resistance, in the 438s. And we might see it just pop a little bit more, but I don't expect it to just keep going and going and going. I think we're going to end up becoming range bound, and we're just going to trade sideways for some time before the market declines again. Now, if we go back on the chart, you will notice that on the 4-hour time frame, we saw something very similar to this back, I think it was close to like August when SPY was pumping. So basically, when SPY was going up to these higher levels back here, we were noticing that at this phase right here, we had a very similar looking setup where we formed a gravestone doji. And what basically happened to SPY was we went a little bit higher. We were trading sideways. We started to go a little bit higher before we formed our final top. And then the market starts to decline just a little bit. I'm not saying the market's going to like crash or anything. Just a very healthy pullback could be coming kind of like this. But I think that the market may remain like this just to start us off where we go a little bit higher. And we just start to remain range bound, going back and forth and back and forth before the decline finally comes eventually. Not saying it's going to be big like this. I'm just saying it's going to likely be kind of minor compared to how much pumping we've done, because I'm still leaning more bullish for the end of the year. And I just think another buying opportunity is coming. So once again, we could see SPY in real time push a little bit higher. I don't think the 4-hour has crossed yet. It might just try to push a bit higher. Watch that 436 resistance. If it breaks, watch 437. The resistance is not that tight there. 438 is where it gets tighter, and I think around there is where this thing may form a top, very close to that area. And then we're going to see this thing just go back and forth between support and resistance, and eventually it's going to slow down later on. That's what I think is most likely going to happen now. So we have this supply zone up here, right? This is where we have some tough resistance in the 438s. 437 has some resistance in this area right here. And then we also have support now acting at this trend line in the 434s. Then we have 433.5, 432.5. We have to break below 433 to turn more bearish. Once we break that, this thing is going to start declining. As of right now, we've held above 433, and there's no true sign of us breaking down just yet now. So once again, guys, I think this thing is going to pop a little bit, remain range bound, go back and forth up here. It's not going to just break out super hard and just keep going. I think it's just going to be a small break and lots of sideways price action. And then later on, this thing is going to eventually start declining as the days pass. It may take a little bit longer than expected, but it is what it is. On the QQQ, I think something very similar is developing. We have a potential bullish wedge developing on it, and I think that Aapl may help this thing pump higher. So it might get very close to 370 to 371, trade sideways up here, become range bound all over again, then eventually decline later on and make its way back down. So look for some sideways price action, a little pop, sideways price action up here for it to be range bound. I think 370 could be coming for one last pop for sideways price action, and then later on we're going to see this thing decline in the future. We're just not there yet. On Nvda, something very similar is developing, with a bullish wedge also trying to develop on Nvidia now. And I think that Nvidia had this resistance right here, very close to 460. We didn't quite get there, so it could go a little higher between 460 and 462. So my gut is telling me that Nvidia is going to make an attempt to go a bit higher. We could see 460 coming. a little bit more upside, and then we're going to see this thing just chop up here for some time, maybe establish a bearish divergence, and eventually Nvidia is going to reject and make its way back down towards these lower levels. Nvidia made an attempt to break down. We saw this thing coming down. It came down. We were calling this gap to get filled. That's what happened. We were correct about the move, but at the end of the day, during the final hour and a half, the buyers came in. They swept it right back up, and it looks like they're going to try to defend it for tomorrow. So we're not ready yet. The buyers are still coming in. Look for a little bit more upside than sideways price action and a decline to come later on, and watch these supports very carefully. Make sure you watch this trend line of support around 455. If you lose that, watch 452.5, 451, 448, and then 444. For resistance, watch 460, 462.5, and then we have 465. A little pop, sideways price action, and a drop later on, right? The drop's going to be kind of delayed, should be coming in the future. We also have Jerome Powell giving a speech on Wednesday. We'll see what he causes. For Tesla, I think that Tesla is going to be range bound for some time. So we came to this support. I told everyone in my intraday video that if we came down here, we might see some buyers try to defend it, try to push it back up here, but I wasn't expecting it to be like too insane. And that's very close to what happened. Now, Tesla has a double top like formation, but I think that it's going to make an attempt to go back up to about the 222 area. It's going to remain range bound for some time. And then what could end up happening is we eventually see Tesla decline. Now, one could also argue that the bearish case would be we have like a head and shoulders here. There's like a left shoulder, a double top, then a right shoulder forming. We could see it retest 220 to 222, then decline. And if Tesla loses 215, anticipate that it's going to continue to sink towards 210 or below that. So we're going to be watching 215 as critical support. Tesla is looking a bit weaker compared to the market, so there is a higher risk of some downside for it. And it might come down looking at the current technicals. So look for a little pop and drop on Tesla. I think Tesla might be a little bit weaker than SPY and Nvda. So be very careful, especially because we closed red. And make sure you watch these levels very carefully. But that's it for the main five I typically go over. The whole market may pump a little bit. Then it's going to become range bound, and there may be downside coming later. Tesla, on the other hand, could pop a bit with the markets, but it might slow down because we have a possible head and shoulders developing. If Tesla loses 215, expect this thing to start sinking towards 212, then maybe even 205 if we end up breaking below that. So watch 215 as key support. If we lose this, the head and shoulders will play out. I'm thinking it might pop first before that happens, so just watch the levels very carefully. All right, so that's it for the main five. We're just going to be very brief with the others. The IWM is looking kind of weaker right now. We have a potential bearish cross in the PPO. We could get a retest of 172.8, maybe even 174 before we start declining, but this is looking a bit more bearish than SPY, so I anticipate some downsides coming to the Russell 2000. For something else such as Microsoft made a nice move up 1%, but this thing is, in my opinion, we're forming like a rising wedge. So I think that it's eventually going to get very close to 360, then reject and make its way back down to 349. Eventually, it may take like a few weeks though. On AMD, this is looking a little weaker. We have a potential bearish divergence right here. We could see this thing pop one more time towards this 113.38 area, potentially even up to about 115. I keep saying 3, guys. I'm thinking of the QQQ. 115, and then we might reject off there and make our way back down to 108. So look for a little pop and then drop on this. On the VIX, I mean, this thing is still looking bearish. We're not ready to bounce yet. So if the VIX keeps dropping, the market might try to rebound a little bit more. But if the VIX starts bouncing, so it might drop a little bit more towards support and then bounce. So we're going to be watching this very carefully. When you look at the daily on the VIX, you're going to notice that we're approaching this support right here around this 13.62 area. It's about 13.9. So we're getting very close to that. We might see it decline a bit more before this thing bounces. And then what I'm thinking is the market's going to likely pop a bit before we see this thing continue. For the SQQQ, it's still looking a little weak, but it's approaching key support at 18. Might drop a little bit more, hit that 18, then bounce, and we could come up to fill this gap later. We just need a bit more time. So I'm thinking the market may pop a little bit more and then start dropping soon. The SQQQ might be bouncing soon. It might drop a bit more than bounce. The dollar is, once again, it's trying to bounce right here. If the dollar starts to rebound a bit more, this could cause the market to sink. So there's going to be a risk of that. Maybe the market pumps a bit more, and then we eventually see downside coming later. On Coinbase, we have a doji potentially forming on the daily, so this might start reversing early, so watch for a retest of 83. If we lose that at the 5 EMA, watch 80, then 78 to come very soon. For Google, we're going to be watching this resistance at 132.5. It's making attempts to fill the gap, but we have some tight resistance at these levels. If we end up rejecting on the 132s, it could decline towards 130. So watch those levels very carefully. On the daily charts of the 10-year Treasury yield, this thing is looking like it might fill this gap soon, causing the market to decline. We're not there yet. We're not ready yet. We're going to be watching this resistance at the 5 EMA at this 46.9 area. If we kind of trade sideways around here, we might just see the market remain range bound as well. Maybe the market, pops a bit and it remains range bound, but later on, over the next 2 weeks, I think that this is going to fill the gap and cause the market to slow down. So the market may have some downside in 2 weeks, within the next 2 weeks, but the market may pop first before the downside comes. And then for Amazon, when you look at the 4-hour time frame, we're still on an uptrend. Amazon is approaching some tight resistance, but we have a bullish wedge developing, so we could see a push for 142 plus before this thing starts to cool off. But we have a bearish divergence developing, so watch for about around this 142 area, like right up here. Then a rejection, and then once it rejects, we're going to see Amazon cool off. So I'm anticipating a rejection soon. Could pop a bit more than reject, so watch that very carefully. On Meta, this thing that was trying to rebound today, we could be looking for a retest of this 318 area before rejection, and we're going to be watching it carefully. Now we have a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure. If we make our way up to 318, if we don't reject off of it, we could push a little higher towards 325 before the rejection comes. So we'll have to see if we hold this resistance or not. Do we hold 319 and reject, or do we break above it? If we break it, 325 is coming. If we fail at it, then this could be like our opportunity for this thing to reject, and there's going to be a risk of it. All right, so that's it for this video, guys. Hopefully this video was helpful. I know my view changed pretty quickly, but that's because the market technicals change, and they could change very fast. So yes, I mean, I do favor downside coming soon. I just don't think we're ready for it yet. The market might just remain range bound for some time. It may pop a bit more, and then we're going to see some range bound sideways price action. And then later on down the line, I see the decline coming, a very healthy pullback, nothing too crazy. And I just wanted to warn you about that. All right. So thank you for listening. Get ready for lots of Fed speakers for tomorrow. Don't forget, Jerome Powell is going to be speaking on Wednesday. We'll see what the guy has to say this time. And with that said, I'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Thank you all so much, and peace out.